Indiana's 4th Congressional District stretches further than people often realize, from research corridors around Lafayette and Purdue University, through farm country near Frankfort and Delphi, into growing suburban communities like Avon, Plainfield, and Zionsville, and across historic towns like Greencastle and Martinsville. It's a district built on contrast, agriculture, and innovation, suburbs and small towns, old industries and emerging technologies. And that means representation here requires balance. Because when policy is written in Washington, it doesn't land evenly. It lands in classrooms, factories, small businesses, and family kitchens across this district. Tonight's guest believes the 4th deserves leadership that can connect those very different realities. Our guest tonight is Joe Mackey, a Democratic candidate for Indiana's 4th Congressional District, a region stretching across west central Indiana. Joe is no stranger to this race. He has been part of the conversation in the 4th before, stepping forward in earlier cycles to challenge the status quo and bring attention to issues like healthcare, affordability, education, and the economic realities facing farmers and working families. Joe lives in Lafayette and spent many years working in manufacturing, bringing a blue-collar perspective to a district that blends research hubs like Purdue with agricultural communities and growing suburbs around Indianapolis. His message is often focused on bread and butter concerns, especially the rising cost of healthcare, which he has described as a crisis affecting voters across party lines. Now he's back again, entering another crowded Democratic field in a district that historically leans Republican, but continues to attract candidates who believe the coalition to compete here can be built. Tonight, we'll talk about what he learned from his previous run, how his campaign message has evolved, and what he believes it will take to compete in a district as politically complex as the 4th. Joe, welcome to Hold 'em Accountable.
Thank you, Derek. Thank you for having me on. I look forward to the conversation.
It's always a joy to talk about this district because, as most of my viewers know, I ran here 2 years ago. Joe was the district chair when I put in my hat. It's a very special district to me, so I want the best person to be the Democratic nominee. That brings us to the first question. The 4th district combines suburban growth with rural counties. How would you balance those competing priorities in Congress?
Well, understand that there are needs going on in our rural communities which are not being met, primarily in the way of healthcare, in the way of funding education, definitely needs now in terms of agriculture. And we need somebody that I believe has been in this district, active in every county in this district for the last decade. And I mean, I'm not just learning these intricacies. I have been involved in the conversations with industrialists, with small business people, with blue collar workers, with farmers. They're all a part of our district. How do you balance the needs? Well, it can be affected by the caucuses that you serve, that you work with. It can be balanced by the committees that you serve on. It can be balanced by the messages that you take. We find too often, especially on the Democratic side, that programs don't reach, as you said, rural communities. And there's a special tie to our district. I don't think that we're being well represented in Congress. I don't believe we have been for some time. I think we have a corporate Republican who is more interested in serving Donald Trump than he is in serving the people of the 4th district. So, we have to put a floor under collapsing agriculture. Agriculture is a $35 billion industry here in Indiana. And if we stand by and allow it to continue its collapse, there will be no community in the 4th district that will go unaffected by this fallout. In education, we need to restore Title I. We need to pay rural teachers a competitive wage. We have a hard time keeping teachers in rural communities because their interest is in maximizing their salary. And so we lose rural teachers to the larger population centers within our district, within the state. We lose teachers to out-of-state school systems. So retention, it matters. Secondly, and we saw this with the shutdown when the pandemic hit, more urban schools were able to pivot right away to e-learning. Everyone heard about e-learning, but we had rural schools that didn't have any internet. Every place they went, it's not uncommon for rural Hoosiers to take their children into a McDonald's or the library or some place that offers internet services for them to do their homework. And all those facilities were closed down, and these schools, these kids in the rural areas were really left kind of high and dry. So, how do we manage that? How do we keep these kids in the educational loop? Secondly, how are we going to pay for college education? We're bankrupting our kids who are going through 4 years of very expensive education and then coming out and finding there is no job market suitable to them here in Indiana. They're leaving. They're going where the jobs are, and they're going where the wages are better and the benefits are better. So, education matters, and it matters to our district and our rural kids. We need some equity, and I have argued that for a very long time. Uh, we need to talk about housing. Uh, if you look, how do you balance? Well, clearly the rural counties aren't interested in having data centers and monolithic factories planted in their backyards on prime farm ground. But I think they would be amenable to housing and smaller businesses. And I think we can do, and if you go out on my website, you can read about housing, affordable housing, and how I think we can structure it. I didn't dream it up either. I mean, this isn't Joe Mackey put this recipe together. I took an active program called Rapid Rehousing, which we just completed a project here in Lafayette. We built a number of apartments, and we're transitioning people out of homelessness and into their own apartments. And then we're supporting them with helping them get jobs, and every building has a counselor, and the counselors, work with the residents. It's a great program. But what struck me about it was a public-private partnership. So the county put up some money. Both cities, Lafayette and West Lafayette, put up money. They worked with contractors and developers to build this apartment at far under market price. And I'm thinking the only thing that we would have to do is include the federal government in rapid first-time house developing, starter home development. And I think we can do that. We can work with communities at the local level and help them finance starter homes. So I'm from Lafayette, as you mentioned, but I know that there isn't a community in Indiana that doesn't or isn't familiar with National Homes houses. You remember the National Homes houses? I lived in 2 of them growing up. And we've gotten away from that. And now these houses are all custom built, and they're $180,000 and up. We have gotten away from the sensibility of creating starter homes. My mother's first starter home was a National Homes house here in Lafayette. She lived in it. I think we lived in it for about 5, 6, 7 years. And then she sold that and she moved into the second phase of National Homes housing, which was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, 2-car garage house on a court. And I think we can do that again. We made it affordable, and I think we can make housing affordable again by moving away from custom built and going back to National Homes style prefab houses. We don't need the custom built. And the National homes were all quality homes. They were all quality homes. I can take you through Lafayette today. I'm sure we could drive through Martinsville and show you National Homes additions that are still there, the houses, and they're lovely homes. We can do that again. We just need to put the political will behind it to do so. We can solve the housing crisis. It's not just here, Derek. It's a national housing crisis. It's everywhere. And we have a complacent government that's willing to let that crisis go on. So what happens? Typically, the home is the single largest equity builder a family can have. And we are at a point now where two college graduates can't afford to make their college payments, have a car and a new home. And this is ridiculous. So, there's things that we can do to bridge the gap. You talk to the rural communities. There are a lot of people who are leaving the rural communities, because there is no housing. They want to live in their home counties, but they're not. They're moving into the more populated areas, Boone, Hendricks, Tippecanoe. And we're seeing now the results of that in rural communities is a rapidly aging population. And I think we can rejuvenate our rural housing and actually provide an affordable home for people who will drive to Lafayette, will drive down to Hendricks and Boone to go to work. I worked at Caterpillar for 30 years here in Lafayette. We had folks coming up from Boone County, down from Cass, Newton, up from Fountain and Warren, all came to Lafayette to work, but managed to live in their home communities. So I think we can kill a lot of birds by just involving the government, the federal government, in some rapid housing development program.
Lafayette's economy is strongly influenced by Purdue University and
Yeah,
research innovation.
yeah.
How do you ensure that growth benefits surrounding communities like Frankfurt and Delphi?
Well, I mean, let's look at some of the things that Purdue does. First off, their cancer research is remarkable. We have a very high cancer rate here in Indiana. So, anything we do in the way of improving cancer treatment is going to be felt in those communities. Secondly, we need to revive and restore USAID, which benefited both the School of Agriculture at Purdue, it benefited small farmers. And we managed to feed 4 million people a year. It gave small Hoosier farmers their shot at a piece of that $2 billion pie that we were generating. It was good for small farmers. It was good for Purdue University. Research is good for Purdue University. And I think that we need to get back to that. I think we have lost or misprioritized our goals and objectives, and I think we need to reassess what our priorities are. When I think about the universities, I think about things like academic freedom, and we're seeing more and more government control, more and more restriction of speech. And I'll give you an example. My wife has a degree in accounting from the Krannert School of Business, and economics plays a big part. And so at Purdue University, you have a diverse group of professors. Some of them are teaching uh, the economics of a communist structure. Others are teaching the economic structure of a democratic socialist economy. We have capitalists teaching the capitalist structure of an economy. What this does when you come out of these different assorted of classrooms is you have an economic understanding of the world we're living in and the countries we're dealing with. If we cut ourselves off from the broader paintbrush of education, we also cut ourselves off from understanding the economies of, say, China or Russia or the European Union or Great Britain. And so we need that academic freedom. These kids need to be taught a broad array so that when we do produce these economists, they're not going out in the world and then having to learn about the nations that that we're dealing with in terms of trade, diplomacy. All of that needs to be taught. And the universities are the most responsible place to do that. So I believe in academic freedom. Uh, I do believe in freedom of speech. I think that, professors teaching classes get called on for whatever reason. And I think we need to be a little less sensitive. At the same time, I know from what I've seen that some of that can get out of hand, but that's the university should be dealing with that, not the government. And that kind of gets under my skin. We have taken on a big brother mentality, Derek. And everywhere we turn, the government is just looking over our shoulders. We just watched the AI issue going on with the Pentagon and Anthropic, and no guardrails on AI. And they're turning that on the American people. That's, they say, oh, we're going to, use it abroad. No, they're using it here. They're collecting data on us. And I think that's wrong. I don't like the government spying on us and justifying it as, we're in a dangerous world. We've always lived in a dangerous world. It's never not been dangerous. I think the actions that we've taken recently have made it far more dangerous for us and other nations around the world. I think that, responsible countries don't just work to secure safety for ourselves, but for the world. And I think we've upset that.
I mean, I believe that I'm going to have to hold up my Democrat card on this one. What Reagan once said, the most dangerous thing that you can hear is, we are from the government and we're here to help.
Well, I don't even see they're interested in helping. They're just here. And that's even scarier, Derek. I think that, this whole thing about we're here to help was something he said about Democrats. But if Reagan were alive today, he couldn't be a Republican. His policies would not have let him be a Republican. He believed in pathway to citizenships. And, bottom line is, Ronald Reagan believed, and he said it, you can't go to China and become Chinese, but anyone in the world can come to the United States and be an American. And our government today is 180 degrees out from that sentiment. So he couldn't be. But yeah, I think we run into these ideological clowns who literally are far more interested in social engineering than they are in development. They look at things like investments in research, investments in universities, investment in public schools as an expense, when the reality is that's our investment in the future. They talk about, you should go out and get a 401k. You have to invest in your future. You should invest in the stock market. You have to invest in your future. But when it comes to educating our children, it's, that's an expense. It's too great. It's insane. We just watch now. They spent how many billions so far? 20 billion in the time that we have been bombing Iran, but we can't afford public school education. We can't afford a public health care program. We can't afford homes. We can't afford groceries. Our energy bills are going up, but we're spending billions, which we did not budget for, so we have the money. We just don't have the will to spend it where it needs to go the most.
And then you were talking about the future. We have people like Erica Kirk, who just got appointed to the board of the Air Force. Make it make sense for me, Joe.
Well, there is no sense to be made from this administration, and we could drive ourselves crazy trying to do so. It's almost like putting someone in a round room and asking them to find a corner. That's what this is, and we don't know what this administration's going to do from one day to the next, from 1 week to the next. We have yet to see anything that was clearly planned out in the way of this government's behavior. And we can go back. Look at Kristi Noem and ICE. That was a campaign promise on the part of Donald Trump to go after MS-13 and other Latino street gangs, criminals. And he actually won the Latino vote on that. And what happened very quickly was it denigrated into tie wrapping the hands of a 5-year-old, chasing 10-year-olds around a baseball diamond, snatching people out of immigration courts who were following the law. And this is a problem. It denigrated so badly that even Republicans are shocked and leaving their party, by the way. I am all over this district. I am doing multiple events a day, And every day, more and more Republicans are coming in to have a conversation, to talk with us, to understand where we're coming from. I think this is an important opportunity for us as a people here in this district to find consensus on the issues where we can, and those are where we can focus our efforts. That's called politicking. Tip O'Neill had the famous quote, politics is about nobody getting everything they want, but everybody can get something. And I think when we look at consensus here, healthcare is a major issue, education is a major issue, housing is a major issue, agriculture is a major issue. So I think there are plenty of areas where we can come together and develop consensus. And that's not an, a fabrication of politics. That's because I have been out in this district. I know many Republicans. I know a great many Democrats. I am not a stranger in these counties, and I understand what they're talking about. I have literally had Donald Trump supporters, MAGA Republicans, uh, talking about evils of Democrats and, God knows what. But then in a very next post, it was, why is my medication so damned high? So we have a link, and I think we can build a coalition of us and not us and them. We can be a we, but we need a congressman that's going to represent the district and not a congressman who goes to Washington to support Donald Trump. We don't need a congressman that supports a president or supports a party. We need somebody who works here for us in this district, all of us together. And that's how we build a better country and a better district.
You just mentioned agriculture. It
Mhm.
remains central to northern counties of the district. How
Yeah.
would you protect family farms facing consolidation and global competition?
Well, okay, let's look at it because clearly row crops are gone. Corn and soybean, gone. We can't eat that crop. And we've lost 60% of the market uh, to Brazil and Argentina. Incidentally, you can point to the $20 billion that Donald Trump gave to Malay down there in Argentina to develop his agriculture program. And what are they doing? They're tearing up the soil and planting corn and soybeans. So, we have a real problem here. I think the real answer is our farmers need to diversify their crop production now. And I want to point this out. Uh, it used to be we grew food in the 4th District. We grew vegetables here in the 4th District. Every little town had its own little factory, and they were owned by Stokely or Van Camps or Green Giant. They're all gone with row crops. They went away. But if you walk down a grocery store aisle and look at the products, pick them up and see where they're made, how much of the food resources that we have are being shipped in from outside the country. Our fruits and vegetables are being shipped in from outside the country. We need to put a floor under these farmers. We need to put the political will, and the financial will together to put a floor under our farmers long enough for them to convert to growing food again. It's a national security issue. And this has been pointed out by politicians in Washington for some time. We're becoming more and more reliant on outside nations for our produce. What happens to a nation that becomes so reliant on the outside that we're no longer secure? We are at great risk. So I want to see farmers come back and grow more produce. But there's other products that they should be growing that aren't even in the market right now. Um, so this is how we transition our farmers. But first, we have to put a floor under them. We have to work with them. You're not going to go bankrupt. We're going to keep you afloat. We're going to do what we have to do while you transition. And I think that that's something that, the federal government can definitely play a part in. But that involves reinventing the Department of Agriculture. Doge came through and destroyed it. And, the talk is, can we rebuild it? But I honestly think now that the logical move going forward is to reinvent it and come back to the basics, which is let the farmers tell us what they can do aside from row crops. and then put a program together to help them. It takes up to 5 days for a head of lettuce to travel from Mexico to the store shelf where you're getting it. And what do we see when we do that? You buy a head of lettuce, and a few days afterwards, it's starting to liquefy, turn brown, and rot. Well, if we're growing lettuce here in Indiana, we could feed the Midwest, Ohio, Illinois, Iowa. We could feed the country. And to be honest, if our farmers put their will together with a political energy, we could feed the world. It's good for us. That's really where we can really help agriculture.
That kind of goes with it would possibly open more small businesses if you do a farm to table type setup.
Correct.
So right now, small businesses anchor towns like Greencastle and Martinsville. What
Correct.
policies would help them thrive?
So, one of the things that just drives me crazy is the tax rate that small businesses pay. Now, small businesses, Derek, drive the American economy. It is not the large corporations. And yet, when you look at the tax breaks that come along, when you look at the tax incentives, where do they go? They go to that top employment group. But small businesses overall employ far more Hoosiers in this district and around the state, and indeed across the country, than large businesses do. And I think that we've lost sight of that. And as a result, we've allowed the Billionaire Boys Club to consolidate. I say we lived, when I was growing up, in the age of creation and invention and ingenuity. And because of the wealth gap that's getting larger and larger, our billionaires we've entered the age of acquisition. They're no longer creating, they're purchasing. Elon Musk didn't invent Tesla, he bought it. He didn't invent TikTok, he bought it. He didn't invent SpaceX, he bought it. And we're watching this happen more and more. And the consolidation of these ideas under one roof stifles creativity. And I'll give you an example. We need modern antitrust laws. And let's just look at the last big antitrust law I can remember was Ma Bell. Remember, they broke up Ma Bell. And at the time, Ma Bell's claim to fame was, we've got a phone in 6 different colors that we can put on your wall or your countertop. This was it. Within a few years of Ma Bell being broken up, everyone had cell phones. And within a few more years, they had the progeny of that was the cell phones we have today. So the technologies got better, everything got better. And I think that we need to look at that. We need to look at breaking up large media companies. It used to be that there were restrictions on how much of a market a media company could own. And today there are no restrictions. Well, we look at Amazon and Walmart destroying small businesses. And in Walmart's case, they're paying less than minimum wage, or what should be. They're paying less than $15 an hour. I think they're paying whatever, $7.50. But they also have people on staff who sit you down and get you all set up for Medicare. And they advertise that as a job benefit. And I think that's the single greatest scam going on in the world today. We need to break up the healthcare conglomerates. We watched AOC go through CVS is a healthcare conglomerate, and they own doctors, and they own pharmaceutical companies, and they own pharmacies, and they have their own treatment plans, and they call it patient capture, where once you're in their system, you're locked into it. So there's no freedom there. There's no opportunity for us to exercise our consumer privileges, if you will, when you're locked into a healthcare system that entraps you. So, I think we can do better, but we need to break them up.
Since we're, kind of talking about healthcare,
Yeah.
there's a couple questions.
Sure.
One is, have you actually looked into Trump RX? Have you actually seen that on that website, they have like coupon codes?
Right.
Those coupon codes are good RX
Right.
coupon codes. Trump
Right.
RX is nothing except for good RX. There's like
Correct.
27 medications on Trump RX.
Right.
Like, and that was one
It,
of his big things. Like, it is absolutely freaking nothing.
well, I mean, look at it. We don't we are locked into, Derek, what is called the healthcare marketplace. And we're not patients, we're healthcare consumers. And it's our responsibility to pick the best healthcare package we can. We cut the subsidies here in the fourth district. I want to say it's 22,000 individuals who buy their health care on the marketplace have now found it unaffordable. And these aren't Medicare patients, these are small business people, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs that were looking to get health care for themselves and their families. And we've destroyed that. We have crushed our own budding small business community is being damaged. So, we have a real problem here. And then let me point out, if your county contracts to an ambulance service, say to a hospital network, say IU Health or one of the others, Franciscan Alliance, the Parkview, uh, you as a patient require an ambulance, they're going to take you to a hospital of their employment. And this happened specifically to a woman I know down in Fountain County in Covington who threw a blood clot, and they put her in an ambulance. And I'd been talking not too long before that about the difference between a critical access hospital and a community outpatient hospital. And she messaged me after the crisis was over, and she said, I didn't quite understand the difference between a CAH and a COH until they put me in an ambulance and drove right past my hospital in Covington on our way to Lafayette. So, we have some real problems out there in that respect. And I think I think we have the illusion of choice. But once you make that choice, you end up locked into it, and there's no freedom of healthcare out there at all. There's no real opportunity to say yes to this and no to that. And then there's the affordability issue, which now I know we have a problem, and I will tell you what, you've got a real problem with healthcare when major corporations say this is as deep as the pocket goes. And they're finding it unaffordable now to keep up with the rising cost of healthcare. So we have that problem. We could come back and talk about the lack of specialists in this country. We're 100,000 medical specialists shy of being able to adequately treat the American people. And when you look at the cost associated with becoming a specialist, it then becomes prohibitive for those who have the talent to pursue those higher levels of skill training. And they satisfy themselves with being general practitioners. Most doctors come out of medical school these days as a GP, and they have $300,000 in debt. And they're quite willing to forego pursuing those higher levels of medicine simply because the cost is too prohibitive. And I'll give you an example, Derek. When our son Patrick was on the pediatric intensive care unit at Riley, I had a conversation with a young woman. I'd say young woman. She was in her very late 20s, very early 30s, a pediatric oncologist. She was a senior fellow, and her goal was to become a genomic transplant specialist. And I said, well, how long is that going to take you? She said, oh, I'm going to be 37 years old before I get there. And then she looked at me and said, I'm going to be $1 million in debt on the same day I get that. $1 million. So it is prohibitive. And we should be looking at subsidizing those skill levels, those with the talent and the skill to elevate. If we pass a Medicare for all bill, which I support, I would support that. One of the things we have to be conscious of is we don't have enough specialists to treat everybody. And so I had a medical emergency a year ago. It took me 4 months from the day of my initial emergency to actually sit down and speak with a pulmonologist. And, 4 months. And I live in a community here in Lafayette with 2 critical access hospitals, umpteen dozen doctors, very few specialists. And therein is the problem. So when it comes to like say a Medicare for all, a part of that legislation has to be subsidizing that continuing education that these professionals require to be able to treat us. It's common sense. Sadly, I don't see that written into any Medicare for all bill that I have looked at. Secondly, Medicare for all, Bernie Sanders' plan, he probably says we're going to cover 80% of Americans. Tantalizing as that is, the history of the Democratic Party is we don't settle for 80%. And that 20% that he's talking about leaving out will not only see their taxes go up, who won't draw the best, the benefits of the total package, live in our rural communities. 38% of the 4th District is rural. So, if we don't have a means of bridging that healthcare gap into the rural communities, it would be wrong to raise the taxes out there and not change the circumstances they find themselves in. Our infant mortality rate, among the worst in the country, highest in rural communities. Our maternal mortality rate, among the very worst in the country, also the highest numbers in the rural communities. How do you justify telling them their taxes are going to go up 7 to 13%, but that loss isn't going to go down? So we have a very real, Democrats in this district have a moral obligation to argue on behalf of 38% of our district for the benefits of a Medicare for all plan. But we don't see that happening. And I don't hear the other candidates addressing this issue. I do. I have been addressing it for years. And I think one of the things and I would encourage you and your viewers to go out and look at the mobile healthcare program the state of Nevada has developed. It is amazing. And we can duplicate that across the entirety of our rural communities. And we can do it at far less expense than building hospitals. So rural mobile healthcare, I think, is the basic that we should be doing in our rural communities. Mental health in the rural communities, virtually non-existent. Derek, we know when farm bankruptcies climb, so do rural suicides. And we're not there to help these communities work through this trauma. And it's a disgrace. It's a disgrace. And we're in this boat because the man that's in this office right now is far more interested in rubber stamping whatever Donald Trump does than he is in addressing those issues we're facing here. It is a disgrace. Jim Baird is a complacent congressman, and that makes him a complicit congressman in all of these issues that aren't being addressed.
Let's shift a little bit from healthcare to something adjacent to it, and that's infrastructure. It impacts both rural towns and suburban commuters.
Right.
What's your top federal policy
on infrastructure?
Yes.
I honestly, I can tell you that one of the major problems that we are going to face is water consumption. And when we talk about infrastructure, we really need to talk about the management of those limited resources that we have. And water is at the top of the list. We're already watching communities across the Southwest who are struggling with water. And I mean, just recently, what is it? Oh, the port of Corpus Christi. That port city, it's one of the largest liquid natural gas shipping ports in the country. And they have a year's worth of water left, and then Corpus Christi will be out of water. We're watching water wars take place between developers in the state of Arizona. And it is a limited resource. And we need that. We need water management. And I'm throwing this out here, Derek. It would behoove us to build more desalinization plants, which incidentally, there are people who are involved in Corpus Christi's city government who were calling for this back in 2019. to support their the primary body of water that supports that city is below 10% of its capacity. So, we have to actually look at critical development in the way of supplying water. And apparently, with global warming, we're going to have a lot more water on our coastlines than we ever thought we would. It's going to happen pretty quick. So, for me, water management would be the very first thing. I don't like these data centers and the fact that they're sucking up so much water. And they're effluent. The water they'll be putting out is toxic. And our waste treatment plants, our municipal plants, are not designed to deal with that. They are anaerobic systems, so they deal with organics, not chemical release. And those chemicals that are going to get released will end up in our surface water. Now, let me point out, 85% of our surface water has been declared unfit for sport or recreation. We have turned our state into an industrial cesspool. And I think that, our Republican Party has been in charge here for the better part of 30 years. And look what's happened to us. So, we really need people to come to the table and understand where are our priorities as a district. They won't be identical. Certainly the rural communities have their priorities. The urban communities have theirs. But we need to understand these priorities, and I think I have a pretty good handle on that because of my years in this district to address these issues across a broad base. And that's what my campaign has been doing. And we have Republicans joining our campaign and working with us. So, it is our message isn't being lost. It's actually being well received. And I think we can build the kind of coalition that focuses on the needs of this district and not the wants and wishes of a president or a party.
There's a current bill in Washington. You might have heard of it. It was originally written by Jim Baird,
Right.
called the SAVE Act. What are your thoughts on the SAVE Act?
There's an old Irish politician out of New York, Al Smith. And Al Smith had this great quote, the only cure for the ails and ills of democracy is more democracy. But what we're seeing more and more, and this is not just from Washington, all the way down to the county clerks, is this effort to restrict voting. We have the lowest voter turnout in the country. And that is, by and large, the work of a Republican Party on their own, because we have these supermajorities, and they're concocting all these schemes to keep people out of the voting booth. And who does the SAVE Act affect most? An estimated 69 million women who could very well lose their privilege to vote because of this nonsense about documentation. I mean, literally, this is ridiculous. If a county clerk doesn't know you're not a citizen, shame on them. It's easy enough to determine. Now, they make it sound so simple. All you have to do is show a driver's license or a passport, or in women's cases, because a name change has taken place, your marriage certificate. These are what I call the neo-Jim Crow laws. They are neo-Jim Crow. They are designed to keep targeted people out of the voting booth. It is crazy. And it doesn't surprise me Jim Baird is the author of that. He's been about fruitless at everything else. So, shame on Jim Baird, shame on these Republicans who do that. We see at the local level here at the state of Indiana that they're working overtime to restrict college students from voting with their student ID. And again, it's just another nail in the coffin of democracy. We just watched, Derek, as our Secretary of State and our Attorney General turned over 10 years of voting data to the federal government, a decade. And what they found was over a 10-year period, 21 people had voted illegally, which incidentally wasn't enough to sway any single race anywhere in the state. So to suggest that our democracy is at risk is ridiculous. And more laws like this, even more so. I think it's unconstitutional. I don't think the government has the right to place burdens on its citizens just to vote. So that's kind of where I stand on that.
Congress is often gridlocked. How would you deliver tangible results for constituents in this district?
Well, so, you have caucuses behind the scenes. One of them is the problem solvers. It's just one of the caucuses. You cannot join the problem solvers by yourself. As a Democrat, you would have to bring in a Republican representative, and you would both have to agree to work on a problem together. And then you go before the caucus chairs who leadership, and they accept you in, and you go to work with your someone on the other side of the aisle. This has really proven kind of effective. It doesn't always work to Democratic policy, but in the end, that's what government is. And that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be negotiation, not hatred. It drives me crazy because far too many of those appearing on news broadcasts and almost on a daily basis behave like feces flinging monkeys. And they're far more interested in trashing someone on the other side or trashing the other party. There's not enough discussion on policy. And I think that's a crying shame. We need to get back to the Dick Lugers and the Birch Byes and the Floyd Fithians, those who actually understood that the work they do is meant to better the districts they represent and not a party or a president.
And possibly the most important question to most voters right now,
Yeah.
especially in a race that has 8 people in it.
Yeah.
Why you and why now?
So, Derek, I'm not new to this district. And what separates me, I believe, from my fellow candidates, I refer to them as my brothers, is the fact that they're very much introducing themselves across the district. But I have been in this district as a leader. I have worked on district-wide projects. I have literally worked with candidates across the district. We still are. I have been in the district when I wasn't in a leadership position, when I wasn't running for office. I was still out with the counties, working through problems, talking about issues, helping these parties build up a base. So I'm not new to this. And I got to tell you, if you went back and looked at everything we did in 2020, I could quite literally run this campaign as an I told you so campaign, because the very much the issues we're talking about today, we were talking about in 2020. So I'm not a newcomer to the issues. I'm the right guy at the right place at the right time to represent this district, all the people in this district, both sides of the aisle. I'm not interested in just one side. We have two sides of an aisle here, but there are a great many issues. We're all in the same boat. And we have to build that consensus with those who are willing to come across and listen to us. And I think that's kind of where I separate myself. I'm not going to rubber stamp a Medicare for all plan simply because it covers 80% of our people. And I will tell you, you went back to your Democratic roots earlier. Well, let me go back to our Democratic roots. We created Social Security for all of us, not 80%. We created Medicare and Medicare for all of us, not 80%. We created public school education for every child in the country, not most of them. And when it comes to healthcare, we will create a healthcare program that covers all of us, or it will not be a Democratic program. And I will not sell out 20% of the nation for an 80% success rate. It's crazy. Won't do it. They'll come to the table in Washington, but they have to have a congressman that will go there and fight for us. And I don't see that in my brothers at all. I just don't see it. And, so that's what separates us. Our approach to agriculture, our approach to housing, our approach to healthcare, our approach to education is cut above. And we stand out for that. And I can tell you that there are a great number of Democrats in this area who know me very well and know I have not been wish-washy, not in a decade. I have studied these problems. I have looked at these problems. I have talked to people. I want to point out before we quit real quick. I have a friend of mine who is a farmer up in White County. He's a small farmer. He grew 20 acres of corn this year. And I was talking to him about the bailout. Well, what kind of money are you going to get on your field? He said, Joe, I don't know. So he called me one morning about 6 o'clock because he knows I'm up very early. And he said, hey, I got the bailout money on our cornfield. I said, oh, really? What was it? Now, he planted 20 acres of corn, mind you. It was $8. That was the bailout money. And that's what we're doing to small farmers. And that's why we get data centers and we get unwanted factories out there. I call it industrial displacement. So where these monolithic factories are moving into rural areas because rural areas don't have the financial wherewithal to fight them and the Economic Development Commission. The cards are stacked against our rural communities, and they are being terrorized, vandalized, scandalized. It's insane. So that's kind of what separates me from my fellow candidates. I'm running for Congress in Indiana's 4th Congressional District, and I approve this message. See you at the polls.
Hi, I'm Jackson Franklin. I'm a proud Democrat running to replace Victoria Sparks here in Indiana's 5th Congressional District. I grew up in Albany, and today I call Muncie my home. I'm a registered paramedic and a combat medic in the Indiana Army National Guard, but this campaign isn't about me, it's about who this government is supposed to serve. Healthcare is a human right, and Hoosiers deserve quality, affordable care. That's why I'm fighting for Medicare for all. Once elected, I will continue to fight for women's rights, trans rights, immigrant rights, and human rights across the board. I will never accept any lobby money from corporate PACs or APAC. While I serve in Congress, I'll only answer to one group, the people of this district. If you're tired of politics as usual, if you're ready for bold, people-powered leadership, then join our grassroots campaign. Together, we won't only win these coming elections, we will truly create a system that places people over profits. I'm Jackson Franklin, and I approve this message.
Joe, we've talked about economic growth, rural priorities, suburban expansion, and the complexity of representing a district like the 4th. Now it's time to make things simple. No speeches, no policy white papers. This is hold 'em or fold 'em. If you agree, you hold 'em. If you disagree, you fold 'em. Quick answers. Are you ready? Let's deal the cards. Healthcare should be treated as a human right with movement toward universal public coverage.
Hold 'em.
The federal minimum wage should be raised and indexed to inflation.
Hold 'em.
Workers should have stronger federal protections to unionize without retaliation.
Hold 'em.
Candidates should refuse corporate PAC or questionable special interest money, even if it costs them politically.
Hold 'em.
Major federal investment in clean energy can create jobs across rural Indiana.
Fold 'em. I think the communities have the right to determine for themselves what kind of businesses they want to bring in.
Public education funding should take priority over expanding private voucher programs.
Hold 'em.
Universal background checks are necessary to improve gun safety.
Fold 'em. I think that's a states' rights issue. The Supreme Court has always turned it back. We just watched Maryland successfully defend their states' rights on gun ownership. I think it's a state issue, and I want Hoosiers to go out and vote in the Democrats they believe will get that done here. But I don't think the federal government, according to the Supreme Court, has the authority to do that. And that's been an example in even liberal courts.
Housing affordability requires expanded federal investment in workforce housing.
Hold 'em.
Mental health services deserve significant new federal funding.
Hold 'em.
Elected officials must be willing to challenge their own party when constituents' needs come first.
Oh, hold 'em.
Joe, running in the 4th district requires persistence. This district isn't easy. We both know that.
Right.
It stretches from the college energy of Lafayette and Purdue to the courthouse squares of Frankfort and Delphi, to the growing suburbs of Plainfield, Avon, and Zionsville, to communities like Greencastle, Martinsville, and Rensselaer. It's a place where economic realities collide. Agriculture, manufacturing, higher education, and suburban growth, all in the same district. You've stepped forward in this race before. That kind of persistence tells voters something important. that your interest in this district isn't temporary, and that the issues you're raising now are part of a longer conversation about representation here. Tonight, you laid out your case again. Why healthcare affordability still matters, why working families deserve stronger advocacy, and why you believe the 4th District can still be competitive. Ultimately, voters will decide which candidate earns the nomination and carries the Democratic banner into the general election. But showing up again and putting your ideas before the public is part of how democracy works. And from everyone watching and listening here in Indiana, across the country, and to our friends following along from Europe, democracy doesn't just happen once. It's a conversation that keeps returning election after election until voters decide where the future goes. So stay informed, ask questions, and as always, hold them accountable.